Jeff, such a pleasure chatting with you. You know, GE has been in India for over 100 years. You've been visiting this country since, 1989.
Yeah.
And after every visit, you typically sound more bullish on India. But given all that's happened over the last 3-4 years, has India let you down?
So here's the way I would look at India. I think the people are fantastic. I mean, I'm so impressed by the people I meet, the business people that I meet, the other CEOs. I think that's been fantastic. So in many ways, the micro part of India continues to work and work well. I think, look, there's structural governmental challenges that remain in India. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they get worse. I think the mood about that is in a negative state right now because you're in a big election. But on a big picture, you know, if you look at India over time, I think it's more that the progress continues to be made, but there's just untapped potential. You know, I think on one hand you say things get better. They're clearly better than they've been in the past. But on the other hand, there's tremendous opportunity to be even better if we can only unleash better infrastructure and things like that. And so it's frustrating at times, but I always look at the long view. And in the long term, India is a place you want to be.
I want to talk about some of those challenges, but first, you know, you'd set a target for your Indian unit to grow at about 30% year on year. I know you don't give out revenues of your individual countries, but I'm assuming now, thanks to the slowdown, you're nowhere close to that.
Look, I'd say this year we'll have another good growth year. Last year was a tougher year, right? So we've had kind of I would say a zigzag over the last couple of years, but with a generally positive trend. But you know, for us to hit on all cylinders, we need things like the power sector to work, right? We need electricity, power generation to work because it's such a big, important industry for us, and that's at a challenging juncture. I mean, we still do good business, but it could be much better, much better. Yeah.
In 2007, you said that if you had $1 to invest, it would be in India. Does that still hold true?
Well, look, there's more places for me to invest today than ever before. You know, one of the things I would
America
say,
as well, huh?
one of the things I would say in general, you know, for a company like GE is, it's no longer a China-India dimension. It's more of a global dimension. We do more business in more countries today than ever before, and they all show a pretty good promise. You know, what I would say is that I'm still an investor in India. I still think there's good potential. You know, I think what you have to be flexible in business in general, but particularly in India. And when one door closes, another door opens in this country. So one of the big investments we're just completing is a manufacturing facility in Pune. I think that could be huge. You know, in other words, with good productivity, a relatively affordable currency right now, you know, maybe India becomes a manufacturing hub the way it was a backroom BPO hub 20 years ago. So I think India, you know, when one door closes, another door opens, and you have to stay fast on your feet, but you find your way.
In 2007, you also felt that India was at a takeoff point, and clearly that takeoff hasn't happened. You know, we've been kind of taxiing around that takeoff point, but nowhere close to a takeoff. When do you think India could potentially take off?
You know, I'm not. You know, I'm more a student than an expert. You know, in other words, all I can do is observe things that happen around the world. What India lacks is infrastructure. It lacks foreign direct investment in infrastructure. So I say if you could take the micro that exists here today, entrepreneurial class, smart people, great visionaries, and if you could add to that the kind of infrastructure that exists in China and other places, then I think there's nothing that can stand in India's way. You know, but it's going to take investment in roads, ports, electricity, the kinds of things that make countries productive, and that has to happen. You know, again, the solutions are known in this country. It's just a function of getting the will to get it done. Yeah.
You know, you did speak about the elections, and we are in the middle of what is being seen as make or break elections. Do you think too much is being made out of it, or do you think you know, the way we get a new government could well decide the course that this country takes over the next decade?
I believe that government matters. You know, in other words, business people need to adjust to whatever environment we have, And if there's no change, that's the way it is, and we should adjust and be flexible to that. But I also think that good political leadership makes business better, makes business work better. And I think there's opportunity. There's just a sense on the street that change needs to take place. And if the election helps that promote it and be a catalyst for it, then I think the country will be all to the better. I worry a little bit about there's so much built into the election. And it's improved the stock market. Absolutely. It's improved a bunch of other things.
Corporate sentiment is a lot better.
I always worry that if people hang too many hopes on just one one bet, that somehow they could be disappointed. But again, I come back and say India's got a tremendous number of strengths, and maybe it'll only take a few small changes to get it back on a growth track, and sometimes political change can help drive that.
So you don't think that growth in India is agnostic to the nature of political formation, or do you think that because it's a country with 1 billion plus consumers?
Look, I think confidence counts. In other words, I think there's a sense that government can create confidence. Clearly, it can with investors, foreign direct investment, and things like that. Policies matter. Those are things that let's look at a simple one. Let's look at if the price of gas is capped at $4, there's going to be no exploration for gas. If there's no exploration of gas, then India is going to constantly be dependent on every other region of the world for natural resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a sense that price can go from 4 to 8. Right, that's a government policy. Business can't change that. So there's probably a dozen things just like that could be a catalyst for investment. Now, those are all hard because maybe a consumer is going to pay more for electricity, maybe somebody else is going to pay less, things like that. It's easy for me to say because I'm not running for anything. But at the end of the day, the sense is that there's 15 decisions that just have been hung up because people are waiting for a political change and nobody's wanted to make a decision, and that's inherently bad. And I think that's the kind of opportunities we see here in India.
The other thing that people talk about is that they want political stability, but is political stability as important as strong leadership? Because we've probably had political stability for 10 years, but many believe we may not have had strong, decisive leadership. For a developing country like India, and when you compare it with, say, China, is it more important that you have strong, decisive leadership?
Again, I'm a guy who gets up every day to sell jet engines. So I don't want any of your viewers to think, I can bring a certain political philosophy. Again, I can only be an observer and tell you what I've learned. I think decisions matter. I think where the country is right now, somebody that's willing to take on some of the big challenges that have existed in the country and just make decisions so that people can make their own plans. And when a set of decisions are hung up in a legislative process or because people are afraid to make decisions, that creates a level of uncertainty that doesn't make it easy for anybody to invest. So I think if you paint a picture, business can adjust. Even if it's what we don't agree with, we can adjust. We'll know what to do. And I just wish that would take place. But again, I'm here as an honored guest. I'm not here to tell the government what to do, but I do think that would be helpful.
You've said in the past that reforms in India are an irreversible process, and you've kind of tracked the Indian story from 89-90, which is when reforms really took off. Do you still believe that reforms are an irreversible process? There's talk that FDI and multi-brand retail seen as a...
Look, who's government? Government is a reflection of people. In other words, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a reflection of what's on people's minds, what's the mood of the people. When I see what happens on the ground in India, people want more. People want electricity. They want clean water. They want good jobs. They want their children to have a better life. They want those things. And I think if people want those things, they're not going to tolerate institutions that don't deliver ultimately on what they should be doing. So in the end, I think every business person makes an investment on the Indian people, not necessarily the government.
Let's talk about manufacturing, because I know that's something that's close to your heart, and you've put $200 million on the table as far as manufacturing in India is concerned. How has the experience been?
So we're just beginning. We've manufactured here, I would say, in light manufacturing for decades in our healthcare business. The investment we're making in Pune is the first, what I would call, really heavy manufacturing in the country. It's going to be a kind of a multi-product facility. So we're going to make a range of products in there. Here's what I would say: the building of the factory is on time, on schedule. We're hiring really good people, and the interest of the GE team is only growing. So I think we started with the first phase. The first phase was going to get us something like $500 million of output. We're already achieving that. So already looking at phase 2 and phase 3. And so I view that as a very positive project so far, very positive prospect.
But does India roll out a red carpet to foreign investors who want to manufacture in India? Because a lot of companies that we speak to don't believe that. They believe that China is far more proactive in getting foreign investors to invest in manufacturing, and that probably explains why India hasn't really developed as a manufacturing hub.
Yeah, so I would put a slightly different spin on that. I think what China did, and you can argue philosophy all over the place. They said, I have a huge market, and I'm going to deliver that market to you if you manufacture here. So basically the choice you made wasn't so much, I'm going to build a factory in China. It was, if I want access to the China market, I need to build a factory in China. And it happened to be low cost, and there were certain things you could do and not do. I think India doesn't promise you the market. In other words, there's nobody that can pull the strings the way the Chinese market can. The market may exist, it may not exist, But what it does say is, look, we've got good people, smart people, and we can develop a good productive cost base. And I think that's the difference. That's the difference here is you can't deliver the market, so it means people have to be smarter about it. Now, I think from my standpoint, running GE, look, when things are complicated, I do better, In other words, we're a big company. We've got a lot of resources. I can play across 8 different divisions. So the harder things come, in some ways, it creates more of a. Now, I don't think you want to optimize your system so GE wins and everybody else loses. I think in the end, making it simple is always best. There's no reason why India shouldn't be a good manufacturing country. None. It probably is underdeveloped as a manufacturing base. And again, I think people got, when all the leaders run to do BPO, right? It makes it less interesting, let's say, to do manufacturing. A lot of even the heavy manufacturing in cars and things like that originally were just for the Indian market, so they weren't built to be exports. When we put our facility here, it's really with the concept of exporting and going global.
So given the constraints, then, what can India really do to improve its stature as a manufacturing destination? Infrastructure, and what would be your advice?
I think it's electricity, roads, ports, everything around infrastructure. That's what China did. If you want to use China as a model, not necessarily that everything they did is perfect, but I think all those things matter more to manufacturers than anybody else. If you go back to the BPO example, India happened to be extremely good at broadband and information technology. So that part of infrastructure that suited that business model existed in India from day one. If you're a manufacturer, you don't have good roads. You don't have good ports. You don't have low-cost electricity. So those things have to come and be more prevalent here.
This is something that the government surely knows, and I know you've been talking about it for 2 decades now.
Yeah.
What can it do? Is there any quick fix to this problem?
Look, I think it's certainty of policy. It's in certain ways some of the artificiality around markets, like subsidies and things like that, have to start being normalized. Now these are hard things for politicians to do, so I have sympathy for that. But to your point, these things are known. So in the end, as a global investor, I can choose or not choose to come here, right? That we all have a choice, and the expectation is, over time, these things can be solved. But the people here are very, what keeps you coming back to this country are the people. In the end, that's the people are fun. They're smart. They want to win. They want to compete. That's what keeps you coming back here. And you can put up with all the other stuff.
But given the experience over the last decade, do people still ask you to compare India and China as two markets, or do you think China has way surpassed India?
You know, look, if you're in infrastructure, if you're in the businesses I'm in, you know, China's multitudes bigger, right? If you're in consumer markets, retailing or consumer products, India's been a fantastic market, telecom. So it depends on the spectrum of where you are. But like I say, you know, it's the smart business person never gives up. They never say, well, you know what? I've been coming here 25 years. I've just decided India's too hard. You know, it's taken me a long time, but I'm going to raise the white flag. You can never say that. You have to say, look, one door. We thought in the early 90s that this was going to be a big consumer market. It wasn't. But we discovered BPO, right? We discovered backroom. Then infrastructure markets warmed up, so we did that. Now they've maybe stabilized, so we discovered manufacturing. So now, you know, one step by step by step, we continue to get better, and someday it's all gonna work, right?
Is it also because the hope that, like you've been saying for a while now, that it's the emerging market consumer, which is who's going to be driving global growth?
No, I thoroughly believe in that. Look, I thoroughly believe in the premise. Now, that's not just India and China. That's Africa. That's Latin America. That's Indonesia. So I am completely invested in that as a concept. And look, if you're in the power business like we are, you sit here and say, God, India's great because they need electricity like nobody. So you know if you hang around here long enough, somebody's going to figure it out, and this is going to be a fantastic market.
Few areas where you could make inroads in India, like nuclear power, but disappointing that there's been very little progress after that landmark nuclear deal was signed between India and US.
You know, the way I would describe that to the people in this country is, when you're running a company, you know, you can take risk. You should take risk. You should take financial risk. You should be willing to try new things all the time. But I can't take reputational risk, and I can't take enterprise risk. And so I think if there isn't a liability regime around nuclear power, it's not that I don't believe in nuclear power, I don't believe in India. It's just that it's just not worth it to me to take that kind of reputational and enterprise risk and something like that. So that's, you know, maybe there are other ways to solve that as time goes on. But until that gets solved, it's just not going to be a place we participate fully.
Since we are talking of Indo-US ties, the other issue is the immigration bill, and you've been a big champion of globalization for years now.
Yeah.
To your mind, do you think the fears on the Indian side are overdone, or do you think the immigration bill is a little protectionist? What is your view?
Oh gosh, I think it's just, we've done a poor job of describing how important immigration really is to all of us. It's always been essential to the country. I think we have fantastic talent, Indian talent, that we're closing the door to, and I just, you know, I'm not alone in this of thinking it's a real shame for the United States in terms of where we are right now. You know, anytime you go through the kind of economic disconnection that we went through with the global financial crisis, people get upset. And as people get upset, governments react to that, and so it's put us back on our heels on things like immigration. But I think if we don't think about it just as I wish that we would stop maybe being so consumed by comprehensive immigration reform and started breaking it into pieces so the Republicans and Democrats could find more things they could agree on just to push it forward a little bit. But that being said, not just the U.S., we live in a more protectionist world today. I mean, let's face facts. You know, I travel the world constantly. I'm in 170 countries around the world. We just, you know, one of the things that economic downturns cause is just more fear. And when you get more fear, you just get more protectionism. The world is much more protectionist today than it was in 2007.
And that's unfortunate, isn't it?
It's unfortunate, you know. I'm a globalist as running a company like GE, And that's just where we are today.
I have to ask you about the Alstom
Yeah.
because that's been keeping you busy, busy off late. But happy with the progress so far and confident that you'll be able to close that transaction.
Yeah, no, I think we think we have a good offer. It's been endorsed by the Alstom board. We've in many ways we're very experienced in Europe and we're very experienced in France. We've been doing business there a long time. And done so productively and as a good corporate citizen in the country. So we feel good about where we are. But that being said, these things are processes and it'll take twists and turns as time goes on. But we like the deal and we think we put forward a good deal for the Alstom investors and for the country.
But Alstom hasn't shut the door on a potential counter offer. Are you worried?
It's a public company bid, so like any country you do business in, when you do a public company offering, it means that there's no shop clauses, there's breakup fees, but there's also fiduciary outs for a board to say, I got a better offer, and what do you want to do about it? So it's just like any other public company.
So you're not worried about a bidding war, so to say?
Look, I think, we know what we want to do. We've thought about it. We've got great support from the Alstom board, and so I think our deal makes a ton of sense, and we're confident it'll get executed.
And you think after your meeting in France, at least the political leadership is convinced about the strategic rationale about the deal?
Oh, look, I think they have to answer for themselves, but President Hollande is somebody I know, I've met before. I've, just like I talk about India, for 30 years I've been going to France. I ran our healthcare business that had a big operation in France. We have more than 10,000 employees there. We've been an investor there in good times and bad. We've been, I think, a very helpful face in France and supportive in the United States of how we felt we could do competing in France. We've had French employees who run big parts of the company. So, I think we've proven ourselves as being worthy investor in that setting, and we've done so in good days and in bad days.
Finally, Jeff Immelt, you are probably one of the most admired CEOs globally. You've been at it now for 13 years as a CEO. Took over in 2001, and I remember when you started out, you said this is a marathon, this isn't a sprint. 13 years into the job, what keeps you motivated? What do you tell yourself when you wake up every morning?
Oh, look, I think when you run GE, you sit in the front seat of history. You have the best team in the world, and for someone like me, I'm driven by curiosity and about creating things. And so I've never lost my excitement about the potential to change and try new things and innovate and meet new people and test new ideas. And I'm as passionate about it as today as I was the day I got the job, and I learned so much every day. The other thing I'd say is I love the little things. In other words, I've never really felt like I love being a CEO. I love the 100 things a CEO does. I like walking a plant floor, a product review, meeting people, meeting new employees, things like that. And I love it as much today as I've ever loved it.
So you don't allow a word called fatigue to creep in anywhere?
No. I think really it's you live in a world that you just love the people you work with and love what you do, and that's what motivates you.
Jeff Immelt, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Good seeing you again.
So much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.